We must leave
Kibo said urgently, grabbing Dumi's arm.
now.
But as they turned to flee, the figure let out a deafening roar, and the ground beneath them gave way, plunging them into darkness. The last thing Dumi saw was the figure's eyes, glowing with an unholy light before everything went black. Hey there, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here to continue this adventure with Dumi and the villagers of Sakana. If you remember from our last episode, we met Dumi, a young man with an unwavering commitment to the truth, and followed him as he faced a series of intense challenges. After journeying to the king of Azula, where he was tested on his honesty and wisdom, Dumi returned to his village, only to find that something dark was threatening his home. The village chief had fallen mysteriously ill, and strange events were beginning to unfold, leading Dumi and the wise elder, Kibo, to venture into the forest in search of answers. Now, as we dive back in, Dumi and Kibo are about to uncover secrets that could change everything. The stakes are higher than ever, and the dangers they face are only growing. So, let's jump right back into this gripping tale. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The early morning light filtered through the trees as Dumi and Kibo made their way to the edge of the village, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that something was terribly wrong. The village chief's illness was unlike anything they had seen before, and Dumi couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to the dark presence he had sensed lurking in the forest. The unease in the village was palpable, with everyone on edge, unsure of what might happen next. Dumi's thoughts were a whirlwind of concern and determination. The responsibility of protecting his village weighed heavily on his shoulders, and he knew that he and Kibo needed to act quickly. The truth had always been his guiding light, but now it seemed that the truth was hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. Kibo, ever the wise and steady presence, could see the turmoil in Dumi's eyes. The old man had faced many challenges in his lifetime, but he sensed that this one would test them both in ways they had never imagined. He admired Dumi's resolve, but he also knew that the young man was carrying a burden that might be too great for him to bear alone. As they approached the dense forest, the air seemed to grow thicker, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the canopy of leaves overhead. The trees stood like silent sentinels, guarding the secrets that lay hidden within. Dumi felt a shiver run down his spine as he stepped into the shadows, his senses heightened by the feeling that they were being watched.
We must be careful.
Kibo warned, his voice low and cautious.
The forest holds many secrets, and not all of them are friendly.
Dumi nodded, his jaw set with determination. He had faced challenges before, but this felt different. There was something ancient and malevolent at work here, and he knew that they were about to step into a world of danger and uncertainty. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the path became less defined, the undergrowth thick and tangled. The sounds of the village faded behind them, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant call of a bird. The atmosphere was tense, filled with an uneasy silence that made the hair on the back of Dumi's neck stand on end. And then, suddenly, they came upon a small clearing. At its center stood a massive, gnarled tree, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Dumi felt his heart skip a beat as he looked at the tree, sensing that this was no ordinary place. The air around the tree was thick with a strange energy, and he could feel the hairs on his arms stand on end.
This is it. This is where we will find the answers we seek.
Kibo said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dumi took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He could feel the darkness pressing in on him, suffocating and oppressive. But he knew that he couldn't turn back now, not when the fate of the village hung in the balance. As they approached the tree, Dumi noticed something strange. A faint, almost imperceptible glow emanating from its base. He knelt down to get a closer look, his hand brushing against the rough bark. The glow seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, a soft, eerie light that sent a chill down his spine.
What is this?
Dumi murmured, his voice filled with wonder and fear. Kibo knelt beside him, his eyes narrowing as he examined the strange light.
I do not know,
He said quietly.
but whatever it is connected to the darkness that plagues our village. We must be cautious.
Dumi nodded, his mind racing with questions. What was this light? And why did it feel so wrong? He could feel the darkness pulsing through the tree, a malevolent force that seemed to be watching them, waiting for them to make a move. Before they could investigate further, a shadow passed over them. Dumi looked up, his heart pounding as he saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, a tall, imposing figure cloaked in darkness. The figure's eyes glowed with a cold, unyielding light, and Dumi felt a wave of fear wash over him.
You should not have come here.
The figure said, its voice low and menacing.
This place is not for the living.
Dumi's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to confront the figure. He knew that they were outmatched, that the power they faced was far greater than anything they had ever encountered. But he also knew that they could not back down. Not now. Not when the fate of the village hung in the balance.
We will not leave.
Dumi said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides.
This ends now.
You are brave, but bravery will not save you.
It sneered.
This forest belongs to me, and I will not allow you to destroy what I have built.
Dumi's hand tightened around the objects as he prepared to unleash their power. He could feel the darkness closing in around them, suffocating and oppressive. But he knew that he had to try. He had to fight, no matter the cost. The battle that followed was a blur of movement and sound. The ground trembled, the air crackled with energy, and the shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing like living things. Dumi and Kibo fought with everything they had, but the figure's power was overwhelming. Dumi felt his strength waning, his resolve beginning to falter. But then, in a moment of clarity, he realized that the only way to defeat the darkness was to embrace the truth, to confront it head-on, without fear or hesitation. With a final desperate shout, Dumi unleashed the full power of the objects. The light that erupted from them was blinding, filling the clearing with a golden glow that pushed back the shadows and shattered the figure's hold on the forest. For a moment, everything was still. The air was filled with the scent of burnt wood and the sound of the figure's anguished screams. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Dumi stood panting, his heart racing as he tried to process what had just happened. They had won, but at what cost? The darkness had been pushed back, but Dumi knew that it was not gone, that it was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike again. As they made their way back to the village, Dumi couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to follow them, shifting and twisting like living things. And somewhere in the darkness, he could still hear the figure's voice, whispering promises of revenge.
I will seek revenge.
The village of Sikana was a place of warmth and light, but as Dumi and Kibo returned from the forest, the shadows seemed to cling to them, casting a pall over everything they touched. Dumi felt a sense of unease growing within him, a gnawing fear that the battle they had fought was only the beginning. The villagers had gathered in the square, their faces filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Dumi could see the questions in their eyes, the unspoken doubts that lingered in the air. He knew that they were looking to him for answers, but he wasn't sure if he had them. Dumi spoke with a calm authority, but inside, his thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. He explained what had happened in the forest, the battle they had fought, and the darkness they had faced. But even as he spoke, he could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him, the nagging doubt that they had not truly defeated the darkness. Kibo, ever the wise elder, tried to reassure the villagers, but even he could not hide the concern etched on his face. He knew that the battle had taken a toll on Dumi, and he worried that the young man was carrying a burden that was too great for him to bear. As the meeting came to an end, Dumi and Kibo made their way to the chief's hut. The old man had grown weaker, his condition worsening by the day. Dumi knelt beside him, his heart heavy with sorrow as he watched the life slowly ebbing from the chief's body. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him, knowing that their time was running out.
We have to find a way to help him.
Dumi said, his voice filled with determination.
There must be something we can do.
Kibo placed a hand on Dumi's shoulder, his expression one of deep concern.
The darkness we faced in the forest is connected to the chief's condition.
He said quietly.
We must find a way to break its hold on him.
Dumi nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. The dark figure, the malevolent energy, the tree in the clearing, it was all connected somehow. But how? And why? He couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial, something that could mean the difference between saving the village and losing everything. That evening, under the cover of darkness, Dumi and Kibo made their way to the hidden chamber beneath the village, where the ancient texts were kept. The chamber was small and dimly lit, filled with the scent of earth and old parchment. As they pored over the scrolls, searching for answers, Dumi felt a growing sense of unease. The shadows in the chamber seemed to move, shifting and twisting as if alive.
We're running out of time. The darkness is closing in. We must act quickly.
Dumi nodded, his heart pounding with fear and determination. They had to find the answer, before it was too late. The village of Sikana was shrouded in fog as Dumi and Kibo emerged from the hidden chamber. The air was heavy, and the sky above was dark with swirling clouds. It was as if the land itself was reacting to the darkness that had taken hold, casting a shadow over everything. Dumi's thoughts were consumed with the knowledge they had uncovered in the chamber. The ancient texts spoke of a curse, a darkness that had been sealed away long ago, but was now returning to seek vengeance. The realization filled Dumi with dread, but it also gave him a sense of purpose. They now knew what they were up against, and they had a plan to break the curse. But the plan was not without cost. As they gathered the villagers in the square once more, Dumi could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The curse could only be broken by an act of true sacrifice. One of them would have to give their life to seal the darkness away for good. Dumi could see the fear and confusion in the villagers' eyes as he explained what needed to be done. The thought of a sacrifice was unthinkable, and yet Dumi knew that it was the only way. The darkness was too powerful, too deeply rooted in the land to be defeated by force alone.
I will do it,
Dumi said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. The villagers gasped, their shock and disbelief palpable. Kibo turned to Dumi, his expression one of deep concern.
Dumi, no.
He said, his voice trembling.
You are the hope of this village. You cannot.
I must.
Dumi interrupted, his voice firm.
This is what I was meant to do. It is my destiny.
The decision weighed heavily on Dumi's heart, but he knew that there was no other way. He had always been guided by a sense of duty, a commitment to the truth, and now that truth demanded a sacrifice. He could not let the darkness destroy everything they had worked so hard to build. As they made their way to the edge of the village, where the forest loomed dark and foreboding, Dumi could feel the darkness closing in around him. The air was thick with tension, and the sky above was swirling with ominous clouds. He knew that the time had come to face the darkness once more, but this time he would do it alone.
This is the place.
Kibo said quietly, his voice filled with sorrow.
The place where the curse was first cast. It is here that you must make the sacrifice.
Dumi's hands trembled as he reached for the strange objects they had found in the forest. The symbols carved into them glowed faintly, a soft, pulsing light that seemed to resonate with the dark energy around them. Taking a deep breath, Dumi stepped forward, his heart filled with determination. He knew that this was the only way, the only chance they had to save the village. But as he prepared to make the sacrifice, a sudden movement caught his eye. Out of the shadows stepped the same figure they had faced before, cloaked in darkness and radiating a malevolent power. The figure's cold, unyielding gaze seemed to pierce through Dumi, filling him with a sense of dread.
You thought you could defeat me.
The figure hissed, its voice low and menacing.
You thought a mere sacrifice could banish me?
Dumi's heart pounded in his chest as the figure approached, its dark energy swirling around it like a storm. He knew that they were outmatched, that the power they faced was far greater than anything they had ever encountered. But he also knew that he could not back down. Not now. Not when the fate of the village hung in the balance.
We will not let you destroy us.
Dumi said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides.
We will fight you with everything we have.
The figure laughed. A harsh, grating sound that made Dumi's skin crawl.
Fight me.
It sneered.
You are nothing but a fool playing with forces you do not understand. I will show you the true meaning of power.
With a wave of its hand, the figure sent a wave of dark energy crashing toward them. Dumi barely had time to react before the force hit him like a tidal wave, knocking him off his feet and sending him sprawling to the ground. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Gritting his teeth, Dumi forced himself to his feet, his legs trembling with the effort. He could see Kibo standing a few feet away, his wooden staff glowing faintly with a soft white light.
Dumi,
Kibo called out, his voice filled with urgency.
we must combine our strength. It's the only way.
Dumi nodded, struggling to catch his breath as he staggered toward Kibo. The old man's eyes met his, and for a moment, Dumi felt a surge of hope. They could do this. Together, they could stand against the darkness. But the figure was not about to let them succeed. With another wave of its hand, it sent the tree's branches whipping toward them like serpents, each one tipped with razor-sharp thorns. The ground trembled once more, and the air was filled with the sound of creaking wood and rustling leaves. Kibo raised his staff, and a burst of light erupted from its tip, striking the nearest branch and sending it recoiling back. But the figure was relentless, sending more and more branches lashing out at them, each one more vicious than the last. Dumi knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The dark energy was overwhelming, pressing in on them from all sides, sapping their strength and filling their hearts with fear. But he also knew that they couldn't give up, not when so much was at stake. With a shout of defiance, Dumi reached deep within himself, calling on the power of the objects he held. The strange symbols carved into them began to glow, a soft, pulsing light that grew brighter with each passing second. The figure seemed to hesitate for a moment, as if sensing the change in the air.
What are you doing?
It demanded, its voice sharp with anger. Dumi didn't answer. Instead, he focused all his energy on the objects, willing them to release their power. The light grew brighter, filling the clearing with a warm golden glow that pushed back the encroaching shadows.
No.
The figure screamed, its voice filled with rage and desperation.
You cannot defeat me. You cannot defeat me.
But Dumi ignored the figure's words. He could feel the power flowing through him, a connection to something greater than himself, something ancient and pure. And he knew that this was their only chance. With a final, determined shout, Dumi unleashed the full force of the object's power. The light exploded outward, a brilliant burst of energy that engulfed the entire clearing. The branches recoiled, the shadows dissolved, and the figure let out a piercing scream as the light tore through it, unraveling the dark energy that held it together. For a moment, the clearing was filled with nothing but light and sound, a cacophony of power and fury. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The light faded, the air grew still, and the clearing fell silent once more. The tree stood motionless in the center, its branches hanging limply, as if the life had been drained from it. The ground was littered with debris, the aftermath of the battle they had just fought. Dumi stood panting, his hands trembling as he lowered the objects. His heart still raced from the intensity of the fight, but even as he tried to catch his breath, a nagging doubt gnawed at the back of his mind. The darkness had been pushed back, but had they truly defeated it? Beside him, Kibo lowered his staff, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. The old man's face was lined with weariness, but there was also a glimmer of pride in his eyes.
You did it.
Kibo said quietly, his voice filled with admiration.
You defeated the darkness.
But even as Kibo spoke those words, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble once more. Dumi's eyes widened in shock as he saw the figure begin to reform, its dark energy swirling and coalescing into a solid shape.
This is not over.
The figure hissed, its voice filled with malice.
I will return, and when I do, I will destroy everything you hold dear.
The figure's eyes glowed with an eerie light as it began to rise into the air, its form becoming more defined with each passing second. Dumi and Kibo could only watch in horror as the darkness gathered strength, preparing for one final devastating strike.
We must leave.
Kibo said urgently, grabbing Dumi's arm.
Now.
But as they turned to flee, the figure let out a deafening roar, and the ground beneath them gave way, plunging them into darkness. The last thing Dumi saw was the figure's eyes, glowing with an unholy light before everything went black. Dumi awoke to a world of darkness and cold. His body ached, and his head throbbed with pain. For a moment, he lay still, trying to remember what had happened. Then, like a flood, the memories came rushing back. The battle with the dark figure, the ground collapsing beneath them, the sensation of falling. He forced himself to sit up, wincing as his muscles protested. The air around him was thick with dust, and he could barely see a few feet in front of him. But he could feel the cold stone beneath his hands, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the distance.
Kibo?
He called out, his voice hoarse. There was no response. Dumi's heart raced with fear as he struggled to his feet. The darkness pressed in on him from all sides, suffocating and oppressive. But he knew he couldn't give in to the fear. Not now. Not when Kibo's life depended on it. He reached out, his fingers brushing against rough stone. The walls were close, too close, as if he were trapped in some kind of underground cavern. He had to find Kibo, had to get them both out of here before the darkness consumed them.
Kibo!
He called again, louder this time. This time, he heard a faint groan in response, followed by the sound of shuffling feet. Relief flooded through him as he stumbled toward the sound, his hands outstretched to guide him in the darkness.
Kibo, I'm here.
Dumi said, his voice shaking with emotion. A moment later, his hands found Kibo's arm, and he felt the old man's grip tighten around his. Kibo's breathing was labored, but he was alive.
Dumi, you're safe.
We're both safe.
Dumi replied, though he wasn't sure if it was true.
But we need to find a way out of here.
Kibo nodded, though the gesture was lost in the darkness.
There must be a way.
He said, his voice filled with determination.
We cannot let the darkness win.
Together, they began to explore the cavern, their hands feeling along the cold, damp walls as they searched for an exit. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay, and the ground beneath their feet was uneven and treacherous. But as they moved deeper into the cavern, Dumi felt a growing sense of dread. The darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own, shifting and writhing like a living thing. And somewhere in the distance, he could hear a low, rumbling sound, like the growl of a beast waiting to strike.
Kibo, do you hear that?
Yes.
Kibo replied, his voice tense.
We must be careful. The darkness is not finished with us yet.
They continued forward, their progress slow and cautious. Every step felt like a battle against the oppressive weight of the darkness, and Dumi's heart pounded with fear and uncertainty. But he knew they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when they were so close to the truth. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted, and Dumi felt himself sliding down a steep incline. He cried out in surprise, his hands scrambling for something to hold on to, but there was nothing but smooth, slick stone.
Kibo!
I'm here.
Kibo's voice called back, but it was distant, too distant. Dumi's heart raced as he slid further into the darkness, his body tumbling uncontrollably. The sound of the growling beast grew louder, filling his ears with a deafening roar. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the ground leveled out, and Dumi came to a halt. He lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, his body trembling with fear. The darkness was complete now, pressing in on him from all sides. He could feel the presence of the beast, a cold, malevolent force that seemed to be closing in on him.
Kibo, where are you?
But there was no response. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing. Dumi forced himself to his feet, his hands trembling as he reached out into the darkness. He had to find Kibo. He couldn't do this alone. But as he took a step forward, the ground beneath him gave way once more, and he felt himself falling into an abyss of darkness and despair. The last thing he saw was a pair of glowing eyes, filled with malice, staring back at him from the depths of the void. And then, there was nothing. As Dumi plunges into the abyss, separated from Kibo and trapped in a world of darkness, the true nature of the ancient curse begins to reveal itself. The beast in the shadows is more than just a creature. It is the embodiment of the curse itself, a force that seeks to consume everything in its path. With the village of Sikana hanging in the balance, Dumi must find a way to escape the darkness and uncover the secret to defeating the curse once and for all. But with time running out and the beast closing in, will he be able to save his people, or will the darkness claim him as its own? Wow, what a ride that was, right? Dumi's journey is getting more intense with every step, and it seems like the darkness is only just beginning to show its true face. I can't wait to see how he and Kibo will tackle what's coming next. But enough from me. What do you think? Do you have any ideas on how Dumi can get out of this mess? Or maybe you noticed something in the story that stood out to you? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. Let's see where this adventure takes us next. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're excited for the next part, be sure to stick around. There's a lot more in store for Dumi and the village of Sikana.